So why work on productivity? Working on your productivity means you're getting better results for the time that you're spending working. This means that you can improve your results, your output, and actually hopefully reduce your working hours as well. So we can get you working some nice, sensible, fun hours with great results as well. And this is for both you and for your team. By getting better results, you're spending less time on that merry-go-round of continuous work, continuous distractions, interruptions, and possibly firefighting. They say that the majority of mental health illnesses are caused by lack of feeling out of control. And by increasing your productivity, reducing the number of hours you're working, you can start to increase that sense of control and the sense of control that you've got on the business and everything going on around you. So it's really important to look at your productivity, work on that and see how we can make some improvements, incremental or massive, whichever works best for your business. So how do we work on productivity? The first area we're going to look at is a really simple tip, and that's to write down your to-do list for the next day before you go home in the evening. There's different ways of doing this, so you can work this into just a very simple 5 or 6 items that you must work on the next morning. Then the next morning when you get into work, you don't spend half an hour getting a cup of coffee, deciding what you're going to do today, getting another cup of coffee before you start and then getting into it. What most people will find is that their productivity is best in the mornings. And that's when they're best to just hit the ground running rather than spend that half an hour deciding what they're going to do. The other thing is if you decide what you're going to do the evening before, you will set out what needs to be done because you're not about to do it immediately. So you don't think about it in terms of, do I fancy doing that task? The next morning you come in, you've got those tasks written down. You can't procrastinate, you can't delay and say, actually, I don't really fancy doing that. It's on the list. It's just one of 6 items that you need to get on with that morning. So I don't know if you've heard the story of Ivy Lee and Charles Schwab. So Charles Schwab, already very rich and owned the second largest steel company in America at the time, Bethlehem Steel Corporation. So this is 1918. So this is a really strong productivity tip that's lasted the years. He was always looking for incremental gains, incremental improvements all the time. Just wanted things to just be that little bit better, that 1% all the time. Great mentality. He called in a chap called Ivy Lee, who was the business consultant of the time. Ivy Lee came in and said, this is what you need to do and this is what your team needs to do. Write down the 6 items that they must work on the following morning. That they must do these before they do anything else, before they get involved in any other distractions, meetings, etc. And then just to prioritize that list. And so Charles Schwab said, well, okay, that's very simple advice. How much are you going to charge me for this? And Ivy Lee said, I'm not going to charge you anything now. The advice is free of charge. In 3 months' time, just send me a check for what you think that was worth. So Charles Schwab and his team started to implement this process, writing down these 6 items every evening and then working on them the following morning. The output and the improvements were phenomenal. And Charles Schwab was so impressed that he sent Ivy Lee a check for $25,000. And bear in mind, this is in 1918. So if we translate that to today, we're looking at a check of about $450,000 for that piece of advice. Very simple piece of advice worth about $450,000. So please do feel free to send me a check for $450,000 for this advice. So once you start to implement this process, you're going to see that it focuses you in the first thing in the morning. You get on with things that you need to do. You can't procrastinate, you can't put them off because you've told yourself you're going to do them. It means you use that really productive time first thing in the morning. If you're an early bird and you like to get in the office early, it means you get quite a chunk of work done before everybody else gets into the office as well. So now for our second productivity tip. Stop trying to multitask. It is not actually possible to multitask. All our brain does is jump between different jobs. And if you jump between different jobs, you never get into a full depth of concentration. It takes 10 minutes for your focus and your concentration to pick up on something. So every time you start a complicated report, for example, and the phone goes, it takes you 10 minutes to get back into that report. So when you're multitasking, you're jumping between different activities and you're never really giving anything your full focus. So start to group similar types of work together. They call it chunking. So you're doing a similar type of work and you just focus on that and you block out a section of time to just do that piece of work, and then you block out a section of time just to do that piece of work. If you've got something complicated to work on, just bear in mind that it takes you 10 minutes to get back into it if you're interrupted. So try and work it out on a time of day that's going to be quieter if that's possible. So that's second tip, stop multitasking. So our third productivity tip is eat that frog. So I don't know if you've heard of the book by Brian Tracy or if you've read it, but what Brian Tracy's talking about is finding that task that you really don't want to do and that you're putting off. And do that first thing in the morning. Now, if you're an early bird and you're starting at 8 o'clock and you can't get through to somebody till 9 o'clock, you're going to have to schedule that in. But you need to do that task that you've been putting off first thing. By doing that first thing, the expression is that nothing after that tastes bad. If you're doing that, everything after that tastes good. The frog doesn't taste good, but everything after that's going to taste nice. Secondly, when you're procrastinating on something you're putting off, it nags at the back of your brain. So you're actually using a percentage of your brain power to worry about the thing that you don't want to do, which means that you're never going to be quite as effective. So that one task, have that one frog that you get over and done with first thing in the morning. Everything else after that will taste great and you'll have a brilliant day. So our fourth productivity tip, and that's to write down all the distractions and the interruptions you get during the course of the day. So start to journal your day. Get a spreadsheet or a piece of paper with just half-hour slots all the way through the working day. Every half hour, write down what you did during that past half hour. Write down the interruptions, the distractions, and what you were working on. Once you start to write this down, you'll get two sides to this. One, you'll start to see the distractions and you'll start to see the interruptions. Then you can start to work around those. Do you lock your phone in the bottom drawer so that you can't look at Facebook? Or do you put your phone on silent so that you're not getting so many phone calls or text messages or WhatsApp messages? Secondly, you'll start to see what you're spending your time doing. And when you have to write down that you got distracted by X or you picked up the phone 3 times in the last half hour to read text messages coming through from social contacts, you'll start to find that you don't want to write that down. And you'll actually very gently start to self-manage. So this is a great tip because it's not a big change in your life. You're not forcing yourself to do something. There's not that horrible discipline word in there. You just start to realize, I don't want to write down that I just spent 20 minutes getting distracted on Facebook. So I'm going to put Facebook down now that I've just checked that contact I wanted to speak to, and I'm going to get on with something else. So journaling those half-hour slots during the course of the day, what you do, what you get distracted by, what interruptions you have, and you'll find that it actually starts to improve on its own. And then productivity tip number 5. Once you've got your list with the half-hour slots in and you've got that template, you can use that for the next step in your time planning and your list creation. So what I find is during the course of the day, obviously I've got various appointments, I'm coaching clients, I'm meeting new clients, and so I don't always have a full day to sit down and work on what I'd like to work on. So on those half-hour slots from 8 o'clock through till 6 o'clock, I'll start to pencil in the evening before the meetings that I've got the next day and any travel time, and then I know what time I've got outside of that. Now some days on a really busy, sociable, active day, I may only have half an hour to an hour to do something from my to-do list, which means that I'm only going to put that one thing in there and I'm going to have realistic expectations of myself the following day. I know I can't do 6 top items, I've only got half an hour in that day. Conversely, if I've got a quieter day and I've got a day where I can really catch up and do all the bits that I've really been wanting to work on, start spending time for future planning and those important tasks, then I can start to put those things in. By putting them into time slots, again, that reduces procrastination. I've said that I'm going to do this task between 10 and 11. So if it's something that for me I find more challenging or I don't enjoy as much, I'm not going to procrastinate because I've told myself I'm doing it between 10 and 11. So I just have to get on with it. So then you start to put things in. Make sure that you're giving yourself time for a lunch break, that you're giving yourself time to stretch your legs. Ideally, you're slotting your time into hour time slots. So 50 minutes of your time is working, 10 minutes just to stretch, get a drink, and start to move again. Make sure your muscles are moving and that you're not sat still for too long. So that planning your day in the half-hour time slots, it sounds very restrictive and very formal, but it's really constructive and it actually frees up your brain. You've written everything down, so you know what you're doing for the next day. Your brain can switch off when you go home, and maybe your subconscious will start solving problems. But in the meantime, when you get into work the next day, the day's sorted. You don't need to think about everything. You're just tracking through your to-do list and knocking off achievement after achievement after achievement. So let me know what you thought of those tips. Which ones work for you? Which ones are more challenging? Which ones have you tried? Which ones are you going to try next? I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. And if you've got other tips as well, really love to hear them. Thank you.